Hi, for those that don't know me, my name is Maytal Kowalski, and I'm the Executive Director of JSpaceCanada. And thank you so much for coming out here today on Sunday, for joining us for this very important event at this very important time. I want to start with some thank yous, as you can tell. I want to thank CSI Spadina for this wonderful and welcoming space. I want to thank our three presenting partners today, the New Israel Fund of Canada, Canadian Friends of Peace Now, and Meretz Canada. And I want to thank our promotional partners, Camp Shahira, Women Wage Peace Canada, Amenu Canada, and J-Link. These organizations are set up at the back with some information, pamphlets, and collateral about their organizations. On the breaks and at the end of the day, you are welcome to go and learn more about their fabulous organizations. Finally, I want to give a big thank you to the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, without whom this event would not have been possible, who provided funding and support for us to be able to do this today. I want to acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and this is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I wrote this a few weeks ago, and I was like, you know what? It's going to have to change because something is going to happen, and of course it did. And what I wrote initially was that it is always difficult to plan events and conferences around the Middle East, specifically Israel-Palestine, because one thing you can't say about the region is that it's quiet or uneventful, and that has never been more true than the past nearly year and a half, and indeed has never been more true than even this past week. Today, specifically, I want to note that we stand in solidarity with now the hundreds of thousands of Israelis, including hostage families and released hostages, calling on the Israeli government to not continue with the renewal of this war and to continue to phase 2, the ceasefire and hostage release negotiations. We stand with the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, once again displaced, living under bombardment, and lacking essential humanitarian aid. We find ourselves in these increasingly unstable and ever-changing moments for the past almost year and a half. On that fateful day of October 7th, 2023, our worlds changed forever, watching in horror as Hamas attacked Israel's southern towns, kibbutzim and moshavim, trying desperately to follow the news, but understanding very quickly the sense of chaos and confusion that was unfolding, that no one knew exactly what was happening or what could happen next. Since then, there has been no shortage of pain, fear, and anguish. The war in Gaza that has seen far too many innocent Palestinian lives lost, destroyed, torn apart. The hostage releases and ceasefire deals have brought a whirlwind of emotions, the joy of watching families reunited, the relief of seeing much-needed aid enter Gaza, and the pain of learning about the death of hostages who were kidnapped alive, or of watching the grotesque and macabre displays by Hamas at the weekly hostage releases. And now we see a resumption of the fighting. We see the near abandonment or fear of abandonment of the remaining 59 hostages in Gaza, as Netanyahu makes increasingly anti-democratic moves against the head of the Shin Bet and Attorney General, and welcomes back right-wing extremist Itamar Ben-Gvir and his Otzma Yehudit party into the coalition. We've heard loud and clear the voices of so many Israelis, hostage families, released hostages themselves and their allies, begging for an end to the war and a comprehensive deal to release all remaining hostages. And we've watched as these pleas have fallen mostly on deaf ears, both those of the Israeli government and many of our Jewish diaspora legacy institutions. As a result, many of us who are here in this room today are having difficult conversations, or maybe we're finding it difficult to have conversations about Zionism, what that means to us, our connection to Israel, and what it means to us, the promise of the state of Israel, and if it is living up to us, our Judaism, and sometimes even where we fit in our own community. And all of this is tied to and a result of a world that is in flux, a post-World War II liberal world order that is being weakened and eroded by increasingly authoritarian leaders. Here at home in Canada, we saw just how public political opinion shifted following the election of President Trump, his tariffs and rhetoric around annexing Canada. We saw Canadians unite not only around our Canadian identities, but our institutions, our democracy, and even our sovereignty. This shows just how key civil society and strong political leadership is at a time like now. At JSpaceCanada, our mission is to strengthen and advance democratic Israel that so many of us learned about and loved as our own home in Jewish day school, at summer camp, in our synagogues. To do so, we believe Israel must continue to preserve its democratic institutions, act in accordance with international law, and advance a two-state solution. This community, everyone sitting here before me today, has a role to play and can make a difference. That is why it's so important for us to all be here together with our esteemed panel of guests. We are not helpless, nor should we feel hopeless. We all have a role to play in moving away from dangerous political rhetoric and action that threaten everything we cherish, both here at home in Canada and Israel. And today, with the help of our guests and our moderators, we'll discuss the situation in Israel-Palestine, in the diaspora, and what we can and should be doing to create the future we want to see starting today. I'm going to bring up our speakers and moderators shortly, but I do just want to give some housekeeping notes. We're going to go to our panel session momentarily, which is in this room here, and we have until about 2:30 for that. We will have 15 minutes at that point to move into breakout rooms. The moderator of the first panel will tell you where each speaker will be for the breakout rooms. You have 15 minutes to do so. There's a breakout room on the first floor and the second floor, so give yourself enough time. And also there's coffee and snacks in the back. You can get up and grab snacks as well, as long as you're not disruptive at any point. Our breakout rooms will start at 2:45, and they'll go for about an hour or so. Then you'll have 10 minutes to come back down here. We'll do quick closing remarks. That will be around 4 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock is when we're going to have the most fun, because between 4 and 5 is kind of just a time for everyone to mingle, get to know each other. We are here to build community. We are stronger together, and we should be working together. You will have a chance to speak to the speakers that you heard from today. You will have a chance to meet myself and the heads of the other organizations that are presenting and partnering here today. And so you do not need to stay for that time if you do not want to, but I would love for you to all stay here. I would love to meet everyone here in this room and for us to be able to connect at that time. Just to note, as a result, just in case you're wondering, there is not going to be a Q&A after the panel as a result of that. There will be short Q&As in your breakout rooms, but you will also have that hour at the end to ask the questions that may be on your mind. Q&As always disappoint everyone because we don't get to everyone's question anyway. So hopefully this way we'll get to all of your questions. So without further ado, I want to get started. I will introduce you guys, and then you can come up so you're not sitting here while I introduce you. Today we are welcoming Ron Gerlitz, the CEO of aChord, Shahira Shalaby, the co-executive director of Abraham Initiatives, Mizrachi, director of Settlement Watch for Peace Now, and Gaby Lasky, former member of Knesset with the Meretz Party. Quick bio for everybody. Ron Gerlitz has been CEO of aChord, Social Psychology for Social Change since 2019, leading its expansion and deepening its impact. Previously, he served for over a decade as co-executive director of Sikui, advancing equality and shared society between Jewish and Arab citizens in Israel. Shahira Shalaby is the co-executive director of the Abraham Initiatives, a joint Jewish-Israeli and Palestinian-Israeli organization that promotes social inclusion and equal rights for Palestinian citizens of Israel. She previously served as city councilor and is one of the founding members of the Palestinian feminist movement in Israel, and has spearheaded several initiatives aimed at improving the status of Arab women and advancing the social rights of Palestinian citizens of Israel. Gaby Lasky is an Israeli human rights lawyer, peace activist, and former politician, specializing in constitutional criminal law. She has dedicated her career to defending civil liberties, democracy, and social justice, co-founding a legal defense team that provides pro bono representation to demonstrators advocating for Israeli democracy and the return of hostages. As I read this out, I realize that I forgot yours, Yoni. So we're gonna have to introduce yourself and give your bio. I'm so sorry about that. I can't wing it because I don't know. Oh, look at that. Yonatan Mizrachi works as the Settlement Watch project co-director at the Israeli Peace Movement of Peace Now since 2022. Yoni completed an MA in archaeology at the Hebrew University. He has worked as an archaeologist with the Israel Antiquities Authority in East and West Jerusalem and has participated in excavations led by Hebrew University professors. He has published many articles in the media about the relationship between archaeology and politics. Thank you so much. What do we do before self-models? Okay, and our moderator is Ben Murane, who is the executive director of the New Israel Fund of Canada. For over 15 years, Ben has led at the intersection of Jewish life, social justice, and Israel. He previously worked for NIF's US branch, won Jewish Innovation Awards for his work in environmentalism and campus life, and founded both online and offline Jewish communities. In 2012, he received the prestigious Dorot Leadership Fellowship in Israel, where he studied comparative nationalism and consulted for social action groups. Come on up, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Nope.
You gotta hold it down.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm delighted to represent the New Israel Fund of Canada, as we are one of the partners of this conference today. I just remember a year ago when we did the first iteration of this conference, and we planned the event and we brought our speakers in and we said, look, will anybody want to talk about a different vision for peace and security? And lo and behold, the night before, Iran launched its first of what would end up being 2 attacks on Israel. People want to talk about it. People are looking for an alternative, and I think even more clearly than a year ago, we can see the differences between what this Israeli government envisions and wants and works towards. The understanding that there is an alternative is becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. The roads not taken continue to multiply. And so I think what I'm excited about in this moment is the depth of expertise on this panel, explaining that can help sort of pull apart and open apart the many contradictory truths that we're at in this moment. I think the challenge before us is to hold multiple truths at the same time. At the same time, we worry for Israeli security, and at the same time, we don't think this Israeli government is helping Israel's security. At the same time, we see opportunity, huge barriers for the achievement of a 2-state solution, an off-ramp for this conflict. But at the same time, there are opportunities. There are real, let's call it a narrow pathway through the quagmire, out the other side, that is real. And so we're here to learn from these 4 experts. What are those pathways? Help us understand the obstacles in greater resolution. The role of the New Israel Fund is to be the backer of Israeli civil society, progressive civil society in Israel, to fund them, to organize them, to help them do their work better. And we've been blessed by the response of our diaspora community, so many of you, who've given of your hard-earned shekels to fuel the work of these individuals. I have to say, millions more dollars poured into Israeli civil society to push uphill in a very difficult moment. And so I think you all should know that this audience supports you in every single way. They're all here to fangirl together about some of the people, the institutions you run and the work you do. And so let's dive in. Let's dive in. Rather than ask you to sort of rattle off what your institutions do, I just want to dive in. Give us an example of sort of what you've been doing. So Ron, you've got the microphone. Your institution, aChord, it's like a pun. aChord like a musical chord, and aChord like a diplomatic accord, is an institute at Hebrew University that tries to bring a psychosocial lens to this conflict, and the NIF Canada is very pleased to be funding your institution's work at the moment to sort of understand, what the Israeli public, thinks at this moment, and what are what do they think and what do they believe about the hardest things, and is there any good news in there? So we'll get to good news later. Let's start with the tough stuff. Just jumping right in, what did you do after October 7th? What did that work look like for you, and what did you produce?
Okay, hello everybody, and thanks for inviting me, and thanks for inviting us, and thanks for supporting us. This support is very significant for us from all aspects. I try to think, it was a very, of course, very bad day, very dramatic, and we had to decide what to do. In the first hours, everyone was getting lost. It wasn't clear, what's going on. But very fast, already at that day, in the evening, there was actually NIF called a meeting of many organizations to think, what should be our role facing the catastrophe. You called for the meeting? I thought it was NIF. Okay, I remember that you led the meeting.
Credit where credit is due.
Okay.
Shahira called them.
Anyway, it was clear for many of us, and for sure it was clear for us in aChord, there is a real danger to violence also between Jewish and Arabs inside Israel. In addition, of course, to the war that it was very clear that it's going to erupt in hours between, the massacre was still going on. It was very clear that Israel is going to war, but it was also very clear that there is a danger for violence between Jewish and Arabs in Israel. From few reasons. First, it happened on May 2021. The experience was there of Jewish and Arab citizens having violence against each other. It was very clear for everyone, and mainly more for sure for us as organizations that deal with social psychology, that the negative emotion of Jews against the Palestinians following the massacre, which in that time it wasn't even still clear what is the size of the massacre, but it was very clear that the negative emotion will be extremely high. It was clear that Israelis will go through a process of moral licensing. Maybe I'll have time more to elaborate later, but it's a perspective that allows people to justify very bad things because of something that happened, and this is of course the massacre. And unfortunately, it was also clear that there are factors in the Israeli government, as difficult as it is to say it, that wants that there will be another front between Jewish and Arabs in Israel. Actually, the Minister for Internal Security, Ben-Gvir, he mentioned it, that we'll probably go to another violence between Jews and Arabs. In aChord, we deal with the relation between the groups in the Israeli society, and we put a lot of efforts in the relation between Jewish and Arabs. And following May 2021, we prepared a contingency plan of what to do if there will be another potential of cycle between Jewish and Arabs. We hope not to use it, and finally we use it in circumstances which were much harder than we could even imagine when we prepared it. And actually on October 9th, in the morning, we prepared our action in the field. We began to distribute tools and began consulting processes. And we put our efforts on the shared spaces of Jews and Arab. Those are the spaces in Israel in which Jewish and Arab have interaction, which is mainly the employment places in the academia, also in the streets in the mixed cities. We understood that in this catastrophe time, the place the Jewish and Arab/Palestinian meet inside Israel can be places of friction and violence, or it can be the place that will alleviate the tension that was very, very, very high. And of course, we wanted very much that it will not be places when violence began, and that it will be function as the beginning of alleviate the tension between Jews and Arabs. And we also, it was clear that there was interest of the side of those shared spaces that violence will not erupt there. I think about bus companies that had to work so hard in those hours and days. 50% of bus drivers in Israel are Arab. Think about the hospitals. Jews and Arab, Jews and Palestinian has to be together and to give treatment to those that are coming from Gaza surrender, etc. I do want to say that we begin our work very fast, but in a few weeks the New Israel Fund funded our activities in this field, and I think it's a good example of the way that the New Israel Fund supported a very important effort on the ground. And in few days and weeks, we found ourselves in a situation in which the demand for our services was much higher than the capacity that we had. That's why we used external funding. We hired a lot of new staff, and we began to work with very important companies in the Israeli infrastructure industry, and with hospitals and with other employment places which are very important for the Israeli employment arena, and also with the academia. Okay, there was many tension between Jews and Arabs in the academia. I just say, think about in maybe November or December 23, Jewish and Arabs work in the same place. Some Jewish employees come back from reserve duty for Miluim with uniform and the rifles, and the Arabs, co-workers are there. Many of them, their family members are in Gaza. Many were already killed, and they look at the one with the rifle. They say, maybe you understand. It was very, very, very difficult. And I will end by saying that there were many, many efforts on the ground to avoid violence between Jews and Arabs. You will also hear from my colleague. And I think that we were a professional entity that gave assistance and tools to those on the ground that work really 24/7 to avoid violence. And at the end, it succeeded. We don't have good relation between Jewish and Arabs following October 7th. We have bad relation, but we succeeded to avoid civil violence between Jews and Arabs, and I think it's a very big achievement.
It's a huge achievement, and it's I think one of the things that again, when it comes back to, I wish we could say that we could look to some real strength in the opposition politicians, but I think the reason that you all are up here is because any of the important achievements we've seen since the election of this government, in late 2022. Has been from civil society. It was civil society that has turned out people in the streets. It's that has been, the hostage families movement has been the only break on the war for Israeli society. So the fact that this war has been so much worse, and that October 7th was so much worse, and yet we did not see the outbreak of violence that we saw in May 21 is incredible. And who do we have to thank for it? The people on the stage and the hundreds of other organizations that were a part of it. Let's continue on a little bit, getting deeper into sort of that aspect of it. I know we'll turn to things, to sort of other pieces of it shortly enough. But, Shahira, your work as co-director of Abraham Initiatives, you've actually had quite long and illustrious career. You've been a deputy mayor of Haifa, you've been in other civil society organizations. But your expertise on shared society, can you just help us understand what we mean? It's not coexistence. It's something deeper, and it has a political element. So I would love you to unpack that for us. Like, what do we even mean by shared society? And you are a shared society organization.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben, for this question, and thank you, Ron, for the introduction. First of all, let me just start with that I'm so excited to be here, and I thank you very much for showing up and coming to listen to us. It's very important for us as civil society organizations in Israel that we do the work on the ground, that we know that we are supported by people like you from the UK, from the USA, and from Canada, and all over the world, because this is your support really allows us to do the work that we do in the street. And let me please just start with something else, and then we go back to your question. And as Ron mentioned, that the civil society organizations, after October, also on October 7th, at the same day, they were the first to act. Each organization in its own field. Some organizations just arranged themselves and took themselves to the south and gave humanitarian aid to the families that they needed them there. And inside Israel, the organization, the Shared Society organization, we were the first on the ground to think what should be done in order to keep our homes safe. Because we have a lot of experience. We know that at the moment, and this is our experience for years, the moment that there is a conflict in the southern borders of Israel, a conflict will start in the northern Lebanon. And then the third area that might be attacked is inside Israel. So we have, we can work only inside Israel. I cannot bring any impact to the war, to the borders, but I can really bring an impact. We are, as a civil society organization and shared society organization, we have the legacy to work inside Israel. So really, we arranged ourselves immediately in order to prevent violence and escalation inside Israel. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because we will have also a chance to speak in the groups if you want to understand what the organization really did, as also Ron explained. But I want to come back and say why it's important for me to emphasize this. Because the shared society organizations, it's like an umbrella of the organizations, such like my organization and such like, aChord and other organizations that for years we are working together. We built a field of activists, a field of organization that they believe in our vision. And our vision includes, for me, 3 main levels. Because for years we were talking about only coexistence. When I was a little child and when I was a student at the university, organization used to invite us to group dialogue with the Jewish students or with the Jewish students from school. And we were only talking about building good relationship, to understand, to get to know the other, to know about, their culture, about their food, to speak a little bit Arabic, a little bit Hebrew, shukran, thank you, sababa, and others. So this was the level of relationship that this organization wanted to build. And for me, it wasn't enough, and not for me also, for me and for my colleagues, we say that it's very important to build good relationship between people. And I call it shared living. The shared living is very important in Israel. And I want to tell you something, that people, Jews and Arab in Israel, know how to do it. Most of the places in Israel are mixed. We have mixed cities, we have mixed workplaces, as Ron mentioned, and we have mixed regions. If you go to the northern side of Israel, you will find the kibbutz, and next to this an Arab town, and then a small Arab village, and then a moshav, and then a big Jewish city. So people are living together in a daily basis. They work in the same places, they go for shopping to the same places, they work together, not only they just go to the same places. So we need to ensure that we keep this level of living safe. And that's why part of our interventions as an organization with other organizations is to support this level of building relationship in cities, in groups, at schools, and at workplaces. The second level that it's very important for us to ensure as a shared society organization, we call it to share equal rights, so to ensure equal rights for both sides. And we call it to share the resources. Sometimes you want to build good relationship, but at the same time, I live in a kibbutz, with all this land that I have, next to a small village, that they are suffering from problem of housing, and I don't want to share, the space. And when it comes also to mixed cities, sometimes I live in a mixed city in Haifa, and we'll say that the budget is not divided equally between Arabs and Jews in the city. And also that the budget and the services that the Arab community gets in Israel, it's not equal to the services that a Jewish community gets from the state of Israel. So for us as an organization, we work hard to change this reality. We work in front of the government, we work with the ministries in order to change the policy of the state of Israel and to ensure equal rights and good services for the Arab Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel.
And at the municipal level.
Also at the municipal level and also at the national level. So the third level, and it's very important for us to emphasize that, especially during this period, that we are also calling for sharing the power. What do we mean by sharing the power? Sharing the power, it means that we would like to see the Arab citizens of the state of Israel included in the decision-making committees in the different levels, also on the local level. As has been said here, I was a city councillor, and I was a deputy mayor of the city of Haifa for a short time. And I think that this is a kind of experience we would like to see in mixed places, that the Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel will take part in leading their cities and their towns and their regions. And the second place that we would like to see that the Arabs leading is workplaces. We don't like to see only Arab workers. We would like to see also the Arabs leading the organization, the director of being part of the management committees of the organization. And the third level is the national level. We would like to see a cooperation between Arab parties and Jewish parties in the State of Israel. The next government and the next coalition should be shared. And this is the only way that we can ensure that we'll break the balance between the right-wing parties and the central left parties in Israel. Because there is balance existing for more than 10 years, even more. And the only way to break this balance and to change this government, that we are really seeking to change it, is by building cooperation between the Palestinians and the Jewish parties in the State of Israel.
Thanks, Shahira. You're talking to a Canadian audience, so like actually, I know you've done a lot of work speaking to American Jews, but like actually we know a little thing about like having a national minority in Canada and sharing power, and they can be prickly and they can be difficult, but like we get it. And then I think like this audience understands much more what that actually even looks like. So I know we'll return to it a little bit later. Yoni and then Gaby. You know, we've touched on some of the internal stuff so far, like internal to Israel, and we'll come back to more internal stuff. We're going to go to the stuff. Is it internal or is it external? The settlements and the territories.
So I think I'm going to talk about it. That was going to be the beginning of my answer, actually.
These issues that we're going to talk about today, like shared society inside Israel, resolving the conflict, which I don't know, you call it foreign affairs, and democracy, like they all share a root cause, and the root cause is, you know, this government in particular. So we want to, like, let's expand the frame a little bit more. You work at Settlement Watch. We've all been following what's been happening in the West Bank for decades with increasing concern, and now it's even worse. So, you know, tell us what you see, but also, like, have we won? Is there any good news?
Yes. So first of all, no, I said yes with thinking, not yes with an answer about the last part. If there's any good news, and so
how do you define success? Would be a better question.
So first of all, obviously, thank you for this invitation, for JSpace, and for the Canadian Friends of Peace Now that invited me, of course, here. And it's a pleasure to be in Toronto, my first time, so it's quite interesting. Lovely city. Great weather, by the way. Great weather, thanks. No, so especially after I heard Ron and Shahira, sorry, I thought about, okay, so these people came to hear about Israel, and I'm going to talk about totally different place, which controlled by Israel, obviously, and there's kind of a joke, is it external or internal? But the West Bank is in many ways different entity than Israel. Knowing Israel doesn't mean that you know the West Bank. Knowing the West Bank doesn't mean you know Israel. It's totally different things, and it's very relevant when we're talking about these two things. Also, when I think about all kind of delegations that are coming, which is, maybe it's not your question, but I think like delegation who coming to Palestine. So they have one kind of very kind of understanding about what is Palestine, nothing about what is Israel, and delegation coming to Israel, what they understand. So you gave me kind of a challenging question. First of all, because you want me to talk about success and optimism, and I try to explain that I'm not the person to talk about optimism, but I will do my best. And something about what's happening in the West Bank. I mean, and I think that's what is challenging, because according to what we understand in Peace Now, we see the settlement as probably one of the, not the biggest, but one of the main obstacles for peace. And it's more than that, it's an obstacle that Israel is responsible for, and investing to create, like, to make these obstacles bigger and bigger, until peace will be impossible. By saying that, I would like to begin with something optimistic. So, I mean, I succeeded to think about something optimistic, which I say many times. Everything is reversible, and someone who is going quite a lot to the West Bank, like a few times a week, someone who is monitoring the government decisions about the West Bank, the money that's allocated to the West Bank, it's extremely reversible, which means that after 60 years of occupation, I do think that like the settlers in general, they have no future in the West Bank in the moment that Israel will decide to withdraw from the West Bank, which is much stronger than some of you believe. Because I know all these kind of debates, and it's also kind of an opportunity for me to say that in my next talk, I'm going to explain in details why I think that the settlers don't have a future without the support of Israel in the West Bank, like how fragile the settlers are in the West Bank. But meanwhile, and that's the problem, meanwhile in the last 60 years, or definitely in like 2 years, the settlers actually used the opportunity of October 7, like they always use opportunities, to in-depth the occupation in the West Bank. And connecting to that we're having a very pro-settlers government, they're actually creating facts on ground to change, or to create a situation obviously that a two-state solution will not happen, and to change everything in the West Bank, first of all in the level of the legality. And we see 2 years of annexation, that's how we call it. We think that now Israel is in the process of annexation, or the annexation is exist, and plenty of time. And next to that, we see anarchy regime, which is fascinating to see how anarchy can exist in a state that pretend protecting the law or implementing the law and trying to be kind of a state with a legal system and so on. So I can say that it's very challenging what's happening in the West Bank, and we are in a situation that many of us, the Israelis, are Israeli supporters as well, are extremely concerned about what's happening in Israel, and you should be concerned, again, so not being optimistic. But when I see what's happening in the West Bank, so I think that it's not just the real revolution, it's kind of a 10 times more revolution that's happening in the West Bank. And if we will not change what's happening in the West Bank, so I'm very concerned about Israel, and now I'm realizing that I'm going to end very pessimistic, so I'm sorry about that.
Well, we'll come back to it
this way, sorry.
If you want to, I think I was just in Israel a little bit ago, a couple weeks ago, and took a tour of Jerusalem with Dr. Shaul Arieli, and he told me this interesting fact that actually after decades of the Israeli population, the Jewish population in the settlements increasing by 6,000, 8,000 people a year, it's actually decreasing by 2,000 a year now. They just can't economically, people don't want to live there, they're leaving.
You should invite me next time.
So you'll more detail like that in the workshop, but that stood out to me really. Let's turn now to like some of the big headlines in the past few hours, sort of like, there's 150,000 protesters out yesterday, and again, like, thank you guys for being here at a time.
Minus one.
I know you're needed there. You run staff who are working on the situation, so thank you so much for like being here with us to do this with us. Gaby, your work as a lawyer recently has been, working with detained protesters and police violence. And we mentioned Itamar Ben-Gvir earlier today. He's a villain that everybody here is well and familiar with. One of the things that is so surprising to us as we look at coverage of, say, the pro-ceasefire, the hostage family protests is, here in the diaspora, those red posters, they sort of have a default sort of generically pro-Israel meaning, and maybe like pro-government in some cases. But in Israel, that's the opposition. That's the anti-government movement. And we all wrestle with that in our own ways. So you're there with the protesters. You're there representing those families as they're trying to stop this government. So, how has the conduct of the police changed, and what have you been able to do about it?
Okay. Again, thank you. Thank you for having me here, for having us, and for being here. I'm a little, I just got here, so I'm a little bit tired, but I'm fine. And what I wanted to say first of all, and it's important to say in this kind of conferences and rooms, we have 59 hostages still in Gaza for 534 days. So we have to stop the war and bring all of the hostages back.
Amen.
After having said that, and this should be the government's way of thinking, and which is not, and it is absolutely crazy that the Jewish state that was created in order to make a safe home for the Jewish people is preferring the safeguard of Netanyahu than of the people that have gotten hostage because of his government. So, so we have to know about that. We have been in the streets for 2 years because we went out to the streets in 2023 when the Minister of Justice started to speak about the legal reform, but mostly the legal coup, which really meant that he and Netanyahu's government were just openly changing the kind of government of Israel from a liberal democracy to a some kind of voting democracy, or even worse,
Majoritarian.
To authoritarian government. And those were all the steps that they were taking. And so we took to the streets, I have to say that that most of the opposition parties were not out with us. They still believe in some kind of correct politics, and that we do not win. We do not win
Elections?
Not elections. Protests being correct, being nice and being that, and they're still there. But we went out to the streets, and when we had this minister of police that he in himself has been indicted for many times, and he really is someone that is a criminal, okay, but he's the one that is saying that us we're just using our rights for freedom of speech and freedom of demonstration, we are the traitors, we are the criminals, and he is using a very strong hand against demonstrators. I can tell you that since then, we have had, I'm one of the creators of the legal defense team for the demonstrators, and since 2023, more than 2,000 demonstrators have been arrested. Yeah, even more than 2,000 have been arrested. And we have been representing all of them, but we have also represented all the demonstrators that maybe were not arrested, but they suffered from police violence. And the use of police violence in order to tackle demonstrators, in order to make us afraid, in order to try to diminish the numbers of people going out to demonstrations, has been great. They have been using methods to undermine the demonstrations, which are not properly, legal or properly used against demonstrators. While we are a non-violent demonstration, they are being using very violent methods against us. We have, even when you say water cannons being used against demonstrators, there are rules of applying those water cannons, and of course they never go according to the law. So we have had many people whose noses were broken, their eyes have been hit with those cannons. We have been, they've been using rimonim, hand grenades, but
Smoke grenades?
smoke grenades,
Stun grenades.
stun grenades against demonstrators, completely against the law. Some of them had lost their hearing. Things that you couldn't believe that were happening in Israel, a liberal democracy, because people went out to stop the government from taking down or tearing down democracy. So this is where we are, and we can see that the minister Ben-Gvir has told the police, policemen how to interfere in these demonstrations, which is also against the law because he's not the one that can tell which things are legal or illegal. You're not, he's not the one that has to say that. So we're in a position now that the chief of police has been appointed by this gangster, Zionist, racist, criminal man, and he's the one that decides who goes to prison and who doesn't, and who is allowed to demonstrate and who's not allowed to demonstrate. I can say that even in the Arab villages, they even have to ask sometimes for permission for demonstrating, and they're not always giving the right, so they have to go to court in order to use their right, the democratic right, to demonstrate against the government. So what is going now in Israel, it is very scary in the sense that civil rights are being infringed, that our democratic spaces are being shrinked. But the reason of all of this is in order to allow Netanyahu to stay in power and to eliminate his legal problems. So that's why, and maybe in the next part I will talk a little bit more about Israeli democracy, but regarding the demonstrations and the violence, I can say I've been in the streets for many years against occupation and defended demonstrators for many, many years, but I have never seen the use of violence, of such violence, and the use of arrest, of the right to arrest with in such a great numbers without any cause. So
let's roll into the next question. You've got, is that the part that worries you the most with the erosion of democracy writ large? Like, is it the police violence and the rule of law that worries you the most? What piece of it is the...
Well, let's start by saying that while we have occupation, Israel is not a real democracy, okay? Let's agree on that. And so, and after having said that, I have to say that in order to have a democratic state, we're all the time talking here in Israel, here or in the States or whatever. We're talking about checks and balances. And what is happening now in Israel is that this government is just eradicating all checks and balances in the most populist manner, just saying that the government is the sole decider of what is right and what is wrong. Okay, and so in that sense, it is one of the most scaring parts. Not only the police violence, but the use of police violence against the people that oppose the government. And I can tell you, as the members of all the organizations that invited us here, to criticize Israel is not being a traitor, is not loving Israel. It's completely the opposite. We criticize Israel because we love Israel. And the only way that we can safeguard Israel is by saying the truth. And what is happening now in Israel is what happened in Hungary, what's happening in the United States. And I used to say that democracies die slowly. But what we're seeing now in the United States, that they die very fast. So it's very difficult. But what is happening now in Israel is like the shock doctrine. Netanyahu is using all the different, but at the same time, he's kicking out of office the general attorney. He's kicking out of office the head of the Shin Bet. And I would say it's funny to say that leftists are, talking about the
Shin Bet.
about the Shin Bet, because it's still the Shin Bet. But what's happening is that this government wants to appoint only people that agree with Netanyahu, and when they have the power, not only the police, because this we know that the chief of police is theirs already. They want the head of the Shin Bet to be someone that is totally listening to Netanyahu,
Loyal.
and they want loyalists in all the places. Then it will mean that demonstrators, the heads of organizations, the head of the NGOs, the heads of the universities, then we will all be arrested by the Shin Bet. It's
Thanks, Gaby.
and so the last point is that democracy is not only important for the state of Israel, it's the only way that the state of Israel can survive.
There's a piece of that question that's for you too. Like, where do you see the worst? Like, what part worries you the most? Is there anything that we can do about it? Is there anything that you are doing about it?
Sorry. Okay, so
I need this one to tell you to speed up.
Okay, do you hear me? So if I can continue what Gaby said, so I think that I don't see the future of Israel keeping Israel will not last with the occupation. That's my opinion. If you mentioned the democracy, so I think the occupation is definitely what I found the most concerning. I'm not saying that losing the democracy is not concerning, but I think that definitely
They're connected.
they're connected and disconnected as well, which means they're very much connected. Like most of us who are anti-occupation are also pro-democracy, but not all the people who are pro-democracy are anti-occupation, this is where I go to say where I'm most concerned, because when I look at the demonstration and in general, I think that eventually we have this huge problem that was here before and still growing, and it's what's happening in the West Bank. And what is interesting what's happening actually right now is that since October 7 in general, it became very difficult to do a joint protest in the West Bank. Like, for example, Peace Now had a very large demonstration in the north of the West Bank around June 23. It was a very successful protest. And then around September 23, we decided, how about doing another joint protest, joint protest, I mean Palestinians from the West Bank, okay? And Israel is not, we're talking about, as I said before, different entity, West Bank, it's not Israel. So, and then we thought about doing another demonstration, and then actually what happened after October 7, it became very difficult for Israeli activists to do any activity in the West Bank with the Palestinians or in general, even supporting and helping them. But what is interesting what happened is that the anti-occupation demonstration became part of the large demonstrations for democracy, which you always have kind of a small groups of anti-occupation people that used to demonstrate. For example, there used to be a demonstration in East Jerusalem in a neighborhood called Sheikh Jarrah. I don't know if you're familiar. It could be.
We have some people in the audience who were part of those.
Yeah, I know. I already noticed a few of them, and say hi to a few of them. But so since October 7, there's no demonstration anyway in October in East Jerusalem in general. So people began to demonstrate with the democratic movement, whatever you want to call it. The advantage of the anti-occupation demonstrators that they used to police violence. For them, it's not new. So being arrested, being kicked up by the settler, by the police, false arrest, they're all used to. So they found it more easy, because obviously the police used to be very violent in the West Bank demonstrations. And I think that what happened and what I hope will happen is that the large camp of the pro-democratic Israel began to understand that the anti-occupation movement is part of the struggle of Israel. Like, what I hope that will happen, that the Israelis will understand that if we're just fighting for the democracy and eventually we will win, kind of a win, doesn't matter what it means, and we will keep the occupation, so I think we lost. I think we lost and we doomed as well. That's my personal opinion. But if this kind of process of demonstration and talking about democracy, and people started to talk about rights, human rights even, and if that will grow and people understand that what's happening in the West Bank is crucial to the future of Israel, to the future of the benefit of the Israelis themselves, so that might create a change, and that's what we hope to do. And I don't know how much time I have.
Well, let's roll through into the next question that I was going to ask you, sort of about the protest movement. We're going to go a little out of order, but a similar divide within the democracy movement, which was everywhere from anti-occupation all the way through to the center right. Within it, there was broad political diversity. And you're right, the anti-occupation bloc was a part of that, and it grew from just Kaplan to some 12 other locations throughout Israel by the time that October 7th happened. But we see a similar divide now within the hostage movement, right? Like there is the hostage square, and then there's the Begin Gate protesters, right? There's one that is more activist, more political, and there's one that's, Gaby, the word you were using earlier was sort of like mamlachtiyut, like polite and more reserved, even though that both of them are critically important. They represent two different wings, so to speak, of the movement. And one is more willing to call for a cessation to the total war, and that's where you'll find the voices that are more willing to talk also about the occupation. So, can you describe that divide to us? How do you see it? Just for a minute also.
Just for a minute.
Not literally a minute. But.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about rights, eventually people understand that also the other side, like the backyard of Israel, or what is happening in the West Bank. And I think that, but I want to say something about the hostages, if I may, if it's okay. One of the things that I was amazed that some of the hostages that were released from Gaza Strip and suffer for about 500 years of hell and so on, days, yes, 30 years. I was amazed to see them, by the way, speaking about peace. And not just that, I guess that most of you are familiar with the Bibas family that were slaughtered or were killed. And Yonatan Bibas, that was actually, he came back. So then I saw that Palestinians went to condolence him in the Shiva. And he not just accepted them, he even was willing to take a photo together with them. And I'm saying that because I think it's something, I was surprised, because it became so popular among the Israelis that this is the Israeli we should cherish and help and so on. And he kind of understood and was willing to do kind of this, just publicly to go to say, listen, I'm for peace without saying anything, okay? And I think this is a very strong image that I'm carrying with me, saying it's kind of surprising to see how people are understanding the value of peace, because in Israel many times it's better to be not talking against the occupation, to be accepted and loved among the Israelis. And I think that when it comes to the hostages, many of them, and eventually actually were pro peace. Many of them were Peace Now activists, by the way. So it's I think that helps. Okay, I think that helps to raise the question and the issue of talking about the occupation. That's what I think, because that's why I'm going to finish. Because the hostages is kind of, okay, if they can talk about it, everybody else can talk about it. That's it.
Yeah, again, civil society has the moral authority in Israel right now. If the hostages movement could say, let as many Hamas, prisoners out of our jails as it takes to bring home my family. They have the authority to say it. If it's, end the war, they have the authority to say it. Shahira, I want to come back to you and Gaby in a second because I want to ask about the role of Palestinian citizens in the protest movement, and Gaby about the role of politicians in the protest movement. Ron, can we, much of your work is about studying the protest movement. What motivates them? What gets them out there? What would they be willing to support? What messages specifically will broaden and strengthen the movement? So, what's keeping the momentum to be out in the streets?
Okay, so first, we sit here in a peak of a momentum in the protest movement in Israel. If we've been here a week ago, I would say that we don't see momentum because there wasn't momentum and there was a lot of frustration in the struggle organization in Israel that there isn't momentum, but things changed dramatically actually last Wednesday, and I'll explain why. I'll just begin by saying that we know from science, from social psychology, that there are few factors that cause people to go to the street. One, people are going out when they feel anger about the government. And by the way, anger is much more effective emotion than hate. Hate doesn't cause people to do effective things, but anger has the element of believing that something can change. The second, people go out when they want to avoid something which is very bad for them. And most important, people will decide if to go out or not if they feel what we call efficacy. They believe that their action will create change in the world, and that they have the ability to influence. And all those things happen in Israel since January 23, when the government began the judicial overhaul, and happened very strongly in the recent months, and even stronger in the recent days. First, people are very, very angry about the government. We see that the government is acting to ruin the Israeli democracy. As Gaby just shared, on Thursday, the government decided to, a week ago, the journalist in Israel said that Netanyahu has a very hard choice. He can either fire the head of the Shin Bet, or he can fire the Attorney General. And everyone was trying to guess who is going to fire, and then he fired both of them. On Thursday, the head of the Shin Bet, and today morning in Jerusalem, they didn't fire. They began the process of firing. And on this coming Thursday, they are going to put in the Knesset the final call for a bill to change the judge election committee. And everyone that understands democracy understand that if the government control the election of the judge, that's the beginning of the end of the democracy.
That was the bill that we were protesting, up to
Exactly. In March 2023, when Gallant, as the defense minister, came out and he said, before October 7th, Israel is in danger because the pilots stopped service in the army because of this bill. You're very correct, Ben. And of course, people are also very, very, very angry that Netanyahu is not complete the hostages deal and bring all the hostages back. Today in Jerusalem, one of the leaders of the struggle movement, Moshe Radman, he had a statement and he said that the government of Israel declared war on the citizens of Israel. Now, I know it can sound very radical, and for sure when we hear that someone declared war on the citizens of Israel, we know who declared war on October 7th. It was the Hamas. And by intention, he said it, and people really believe that, people see it, that the government really declared war, and I would say even more than that, okay? People know that Israel is stronger from Hamas. Despite all the atrocities that Hamas did, we are stronger. But people are not sure that the liberal democratic camp is stronger than the government. And this, of course, caused a dynamic. And the second thing, people really believe that we can lose the country. One of the groups that is very dominant in the demonstration are those that fought in 73. Lochamei Milchemet Yom Kippurim. You saw those guys. I was born 1 week before the war. So I see these guys that were fighting in Sinai and in Ramat HaGolan, and they are now, by the minimum, they are 70 years old. By the minimum, some of them were commandos, they are now 80 years old. And you see them days and night in the streets, and they say, we saved Israel once in October 73, and now we have to save Israel again. And that's a very, very big motivation. They believe that Israel
Last thing, Ron, and then we're going to move on.
Okay?
I'm sure you had more to say, but I
so
want to make sure we end on time.
I'll take half minute and I'll finish. People, the people have the belief that we might succeed of blocking the government, of ruining the democracy. That we succeeded once during the protest against the judicial overhaul, and people are now going to the streets really days and nights, okay? They saw that the hostages were back. We saw it every Saturday, and it stopped. And they know that it stopped because of the Israeli government. They don't believe to what Netanyahu said, that it is because of the Hamas. They know that there isn't hostages deal because of the government, and they see that in 1 week they try to ruin the democracy. That's what we see. That's why we see, I'll finish with that, a dramatic increase in the recent 48 hours. The big question is it strong enough to cause the government to change direction? And it is not clear at all.
Okay, so getting to just 4 minutes for the last few questions each. Shahira in the last 24 or 48 hours, one of the leaders of one of Israel's largest Arab political parties, party leader Ayman Odeh, urged Palestinian citizens to join the protest movement. So, what do you think of that?
Okay, I'll address your question, but I want to say something about things that I heard in the panel. So, Gaby, you were describing what's happening in the demonstration in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem during the last 2 years. But I want to tell you, as an activist, I spent hours of my life in demonstrations, and this is the experience that I have more than 25 years. Okay, so when I go to demonstration against the war and for Arabs' rights and etc., this is the way that we were treated since the establishment of the State of Israel. I could see the police attacking people. I could see, these horses, these policemen with the horses, just beating people all over, arresting, hundreds of people that they were in the demonstrations. In May 2021, in this demonstration that happened in the cities, in the mixed cities in Haifa, I was the deputy mayor of the city of Haifa, and I spent more than 10 nights in the streets, and I could see how violent was the police against the Arab demonstrators. And in 2000, during the second Intifada, October 2000, I could see police is killing the people. In 2000, Ehud Barak was the first prime minister that was directly elected, and he got 99% of the Arab voters. We supported Barak because we believe that we want to be a part, we want to be partner, we wanted to influence the political situation in Israel. And he was the only prime minister that killed, in October 2013, Arab citizens of the state of Israel. I was in one of the demonstrations, and I saw someone who was killed in one of the demonstrations. And I want to tell you, it was a silent demonstration. I don't understand yet why the police started to shoot on the demonstrators. In one of the villages, inside the village, and not in a main street. They didn't block any main street. They didn't bring any risk to people from around. They were inside their village. They could finish the demonstration without killing people. So, this leads me to the question that you asked also before about Palestinians being, taking part in the demonstrations and being partner in the democratic movement. When the democratic movement started, and you need to know that the demonstration in Israel started after the establishment of this government, and the previous government, what we call it the change, the shinui, Memshelet HaShinui, an Arab party took part in this government. It means that for the Arab people in the state of Israel, they understand the meaningful of taking part in the political game in Israel. They want to be partners, and they're pushing for being partners. And last month, we conducted a survey asking the Arab population in Israel. We asked 750 people if they support the Palestinian parties to take part in the next coalition, or even to be a part in a government. More than 77% of the Arabs support the Arab parties to take part in a future government or a future coalition in Israel, 44% of them, they even say in any government, okay? It means that the Arabs are willing to lead, to be partners. As I said, the third level of sharing the power in the model of shared society. So this is something that if we really change the general attitude in the state of Israel, then the Arabs can be in the protest now in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. But I will give you one more thing. As part of our political program, we call it political participation. We also met the leaders of the Jewish parties. None of them said that they're willing to cooperate with the Arab parties. I met Yair Golan, and I'm not going to, no, this is like maybe now, maybe he changed his mind. Yeah. He just said, great, excellent. I appreciate that very much. But the idea was like this. Okay, we tried you once, and you didn't support the government, the previous one. But after 70 years of non-participation, we need to give it a chance again. And I want to say one more thing, that when the Jewish leaders of the parties are saying we are not gonna build a coalition with Arabs, it's a weird situation. And I said it for the third time in this trip. Can you imagine a leader in Canada saying, I don't want to create a government with the Jews or with the Afro-Americans? It's the highest level of racism that people even don't shy to say it. So even more than, you will be more elected, you will get more electors if you say that, if you're against Arab, if you promise your audience that I will never, work with the Arabs, you mean you will be more popular. And this is what we need to change. If we change this, if we change, the general atmosphere in the state of Israel, then we can change the democratic situation. Last thing I want to say, why it was important for me to bring this, and I want to connect also to the situation in the West Bank. I brought the situation in the Arab society and in the demonstrations for years that we are suffering from different governments, even the government that we supported. It means that you cannot divide your struggle. You cannot struggle only for democracy for Jews. You cannot struggle only for a good state and good place for Jews. First of all, you need to struggle against the occupation, because Israel cannot be a democratic state, as has been said here, without ending the occupation. Israel cannot be a democratic state, an equal state and safe state for all of its citizens unless it decides that the Arabs will be equal part for the Jewish in the state of Israel, and they should be partners in the political arena and in different aspects in the state of Israel. This is the only way that we can talk also about cooperation, about building together, about peace agreement, about a good about a good thing, safe area, and not only safe Israel.
Thanks, Shahira. Talk about the politicians. Talking about politicians bridges perfectly to Gaby's question, which is sort of, we see you out there as a former MK, we see, Gilad Karib, we see Naama Lazimi, what other ways can opposition politicians effectively engage in this moment?
First, I completely agree with what you have to say, and I'm glad to say that in that sense, lately, Yair Golan has said that he doesn't see a government without the participation of the Arab Palestinian population in that government. But I have to say that besides the Democrat Party, that is part of, Meretz and the Labour Party had gotten together in an agreement, and we're now the Democratic Party. That's what we're called. But even in the meetings with the opposition parties, in the beginning, they're not even willing to. The center-left, center-right parties are not even willing to bring the Palestinian, the Arab parties into the meetings. It is so from the beginning, you cannot win this fight that we have against this government if we don't see all citizens as citizens, and if we don't take part together, all of them. So this is one of the first things. And what's happening with the center parties is that they are more afraid of what the right wing is saying about them than to stand with the truth. So they are afraid to criticize the government because then, they're going to say that they're traitors. But if you're saying the truth, if you're really criticizing them because they are jeopardizing Israeli democracy and Israeli equality and the place of Israel amongst nations, then you should say it out loud. And what is happening again is that they're all the time looking for agreements with this racist government. But you don't make agreements with racists. And you don't give up your values. The same way that the Orthodox all the time are saying, we cannot give in, this is what God said, this is our values, we cannot give in. We, Democrats, cannot give our values too. They are in the same level. Why do I have to give in women's rights, or I have to give in against occupation because they are saying it's a bad thing? This is who we are, and we cannot give in. So they're all the time trying to make agreements with this government, and which is it's bad. They're mad with Yair Golan and Democrats because we stopped being nice. We started to tell things as they are, and being nice, you don't win the revolution. So it's, like you say that nice women never make history. It's the same here. We are in a dramatic stage of Israeli history. And by being, correct or nice or trying to make agreements, with the Kabbalists, then we're not going to stop what they're doing. So it is fair enough to say that that the politicians in Israel, we see some of them that are coming to the demonstrations, which are amazing and stand with us, and they have been beaten, and you saw probably Yair Golan last days, he has been thrown by police. I know that the Arab MKs have been violently persecuted by police. That is true, and it's happening again. And I want
Last thing.
Okay, yeah, last thing. Okay, I want to say a hopeful thing. I want to be optimistic. I want to share with you what Eli Shalaby, the freed hostage from Gaza after 491 days, said, what kept him going when he was in Gaza. And he said that what kept him going were the words of Hirsch Goldberg Pauling, that he said, if you have a what for, you will always find the how. And we have the what for. And the what for is an equal democratic state. So we'll find a way, and we will win. We will win together. And the last thing, Danny Englund, his brother, was murdered in Gaza while he was being a hostage, said that Ayman Uda called him and after his brother was dead. And the Prime Minister of Israel didn't even make a call. He didn't come to visit. That means that we are brothers. And the only way that we can make a change in Israel is if we stand together. But we will win.
Thank you, Gaby. Ron and Shahira, I'm going to give you the last the last 9 minutes. So you thought you had 10 minutes for your last remarks, so you're going to cut it in half. One of the things that we've seen a lot since October 7th, from online commenters, from political leaders, has been a complete dehumanization of the other. It's part and parcel with populist illiberalism, is to find the internal enemy and make them out of the question. And thus, we find ourselves in this place where we can't partner with Palestinian citizens, or we can't elevate women's equality up in our hierarchy of values. We've been divided from each other. Much of the work that both of you are doing is about, breaking down stereotypes and trying to create a broad civil understanding. So, what can you talk a bit about sort of the common myths that you're all trying to fight, what you're trying to oppose with some of your work. Maybe some stereotypes you'd like to shatter, and how some advice about how we might better hold those complex narratives ourselves. Ron, why don't you go first?
Okay, sorry, too short. So, you know, in Israel, following October 7th, we saw significant increase of negative emotion towards the Palestinians in general. I mean, it's a bad news, but I have to say it's a natural response to the October 7th massacre. But the other thing that we saw, and it's still with us, is not only a very negative emotion, but really a process of dehumanization. In our research, we see like a majority of Israelis that think of Jewish Israelis, they are not innocent people in Gaza. I mean, think about this statement. 50% of the Israeli public support transfer by force of Palestinians from Gaza. And I want to say something, and I know that I'm going to say something which is difficult. I do not think that Israel committed genocide in Gaza, but in Israel there is a process of normalization of calling to genocide. The deputy speaker of the Knesset, member of Knesset Nissim Vaturi, 3 weeks ago, he called explicitly to kill all the men in Gaza.
He's Likud.
He's from the ruling party. He's from the ruling party, and he called explicitly, and the prime minister says nothing about that. And again, he's the deputy speaker of the Knesset from the ruling party. We are really, in that sense, we are really in a very dangerous situation. I do want to say, and okay. תודה שלמה. At the same time, there are also processes in Israel that can show us, you know, what is the way out from this really awful situation. So I will mention them really in a point, and later in the breakout room, I'm going to elaborate much more about those processes that I think can take us out from this crisis. First, there is a new liberal democratic camp in Israel. 60% of the Israeli citizens define themselves as the liberal democratic, and the main attitude of being liberal democratic is to be against this government. And the chances of this camp to win the next election are high. According to all polls, the chances are high. If we succeed to get into the next election, the chances of replacing the current government are high.
I love that if.
Because the government is trying to change the election procedures, and as Shahira said, Shahira is very correct. The government wants to do all efforts that Arabs will not be part of the political system, and they are working on that on very hard. But I don't have time to elaborate. The second thing I want to say that in the 5 main issues in debate now in Israel, the government represents a minority, and I will enumerate them. The majority of Israelis are against the judicial overhaul. The majority of Israelis are for drafting of the Haredim of the ultra-Orthodox. The majority of Israelis are for completing the hostages deal in return to ending the war. The majority of Israelis are for having a national investigation committee of October 7th. And the majority of Israelis are even for a regional security agreement together with what we call the Saudi deal that will bring the end of the war, and even that include a path to a Palestinian state. I will elaborate later in the breakout room, but I just want to say that in all those, okay, I'm sorry, okay. In all those, thanks. In all those 5 things, the camp that is trying to change the government represent a majority. And if I do want to say one more thing. In the Palestinian side, we do see in the recent months and even more than months that the majority of the Palestinians, according to all surveys, the majority of Palestinians still believe in a solution which is not endless war with Israel. Of course, the destruction of Gaza is probably one of the factors that cause this. It means that in the both nations, there is still majority that believe that we have other option than to go to endless war. And if there are good enough leaders on the ground. And since there are many, many factors and NGOs on the ground that fight for this direction, and it is a good opportunity to say that NIF is funding the majority of those organizations on the ground of Israel. So all these circumstances can take us to get out of the crisis, change the government, and begin a path of, instead of endless war, to have agreement and to back, and it is nothing less, as we see it, as saving Israel. And this is the struggle that we are now in.
Thanks, Ron. Shahira, we're gonna close out with you. You had something you wanted to say about empathy and the role of the diaspora.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. So I want to say something for empathy. I think that, okay, I will. But I'm just concerned about what to put the microphone. So I think Ron said a lot, so I won't have a lot to add, but I want to add to emphasize one thing. That when we grow up, I grew up in Israel, in the say that the most moral, army in the world is the Israeli army, and you should go to the Facebook and see all these soldiers, playing with the tools and of the Palestinian people, riding the bicycle, of the little child that they destroyed their house, and maybe they killed their family, and wearing underwear of women, Palestinian women, dancing, and taking photo of themselves next to destroyed houses and dead people. And this is something that we need to stop. And when they put this in the media, they will get so many likes and do more of this, destroy them all, kill them all. So this is something that we need to stop. What we need to stop in Israel, not for the Palestinians, for the Israeli people. We should think about these young soldiers who go to the West Bank and to Gaza. They will come back, and they are the citizens of Israel. They are the people who will establish family, or maybe they are also have their own families and their own children in Israel. This is the future of Israel. And if this is something that I'm concerned about as a Palestinian living next to these people, and I'm thinking about the future that we are going to have together, and we are as organization, I'm coming back to the organization, this is the work that we do. We are trying to correct, to rebuild trust between the communities. We are trying to encourage people to face the reality, to see the truth, and to correct it. And this is like a huge thing that we should do. And, I'm sorry. And for your question about diaspora, first of all, I think that you are doing a great job by supporting these organizations. And the history is full of cases that diasporas, mainly I will bring, the recent one, the northern diaspora in the USA, they pushed for the peace agreement in Northern Ireland. For years, the diaspora in the USA supported RIA in Northern Ireland. And when they decided that enough is enough, they started to support the peace agreement. They started to support the organization and the activists in the ground that they were leading for a peace agreement. And we could see, I just came from Northern Ireland. I was there last October. And I could see the new generation, they even don't remember, they don't know what their parents are talking about. Because the only thing that they are seeing is a future. And I believe that we can do it. Europe went through devastating war. 50 million people lost their lives in the Second World War. And look what we have today in Europe. And other examples, I don't want to give more examples. So I believe that working together as a diaspora and the people that live in the area, and not only the Jewish diaspora, I think that we need also to remember that in the USA, in the UK, in Europe, also in Canada, there's an Arab diaspora, a strong Palestinian diaspora that they also don't know what to do in order to end the occupation and to bring peace to the area. So we should be united with, I'm sorry to say that, with the good people, with the people that's sharing our vision, and there are a lot of them, because, central people, left people, they are more silent, they have more numbers, but they have less voices.
like the extreme people from the right. So we need to get our voice back, and we need to fight back for our reality and for our future.
Thank you.
Ben, can I say one word?
No, because you guys got to get to your workshop rooms. I know she did, but I'm
No,
so
one
sorry.
word, just
Quick.
about the diaspora. Completely, we need you. Jacob, where are you?
I'm at the back.
Raise your hand. We need people to vote for Atikva. Okay, it's important to have your voice. Go to Jacob, sign up in order to vote.
If you want to know what she's talking about, go to the Meretz booth at the back, and Jacob will explain it all to you. All right. Thank you guys so much for this very powerful conversation and the expertise you bring us, and the hope also. The bad news and the good news, it's all in there. We're with you. So now is the time we want to pause it for a second. Folks, would you kindly make your way to your workshop rooms? Go ahead. Give them a round of applause. Go ahead and go. The rest of you stay where you are.